we're told all of these things to do in society, right? Like work hard and get a good job in school. And I'd done all the things that society told me to do that would make me happy. Started to get worse. I was losing $100,000 a month, and just watching my bank account quickly dwindle towards zero. Having the ability to go out and share the things that I've learned with folks and hopefully shortcut the pain that I've been through. Like, that is such an opportunity that literally all of us have. You may not get it right the first time, but let me tell you what happened to me, and maybe you can avoid some of this. All it costs is your ego and your ability to play it safe. Like, I'll sacrifice that every time.
Welcome to the Sinclair podcast, where we share real-world experiences, wisdom, and the honest struggles of entrepreneurs to help you navigate and scale your business with confidence.
Mike Brown, thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate your time and the ability to share you to my world, I'll say, and your story. So thanks again for making the time today.
Chris, totally honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So let's call it your day job. Your company's Unbreakable Wealth, but there's so many layers before that and so much I'm excited to get into. But first I'll start with, you and I had the pleasure of meeting through Mr. Philip McKernan's mastermind group, Brave Leader. And first of all, what a group, incredible people that are around that, the virtual meetings and now some in-person stuff. And how's your experience so far been with that?
Well, Philip has been a long time friend and mentor, and I started working with him in 2017, and really can say with all honesty that he changed my life probably more than any other human. So I basically sign up for anything that he puts out, and I'll keep doing that as long as he'll have me. So it's just the people that have come into my world through his work and the work that I've been able to share because of knowing him has just made me a better human and the world a better place. So I'm happy to be here.
Oh, right on. So you've got this awesome story, and one of the things when you and I first met and started talking, you casually mentioned, I used to be in the Navy and I was a F-18 fighter pilot jet. And I was like, what? Let's start there, because I just think, it's the coolest, most badass thing, probably Top Gun being a big influence of me, at a young age. But tell me about that. What was the experience like, and why did you get into that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's one of the coolest things that a human can do. And my journey really started earlier, like from childhood. I read Patriot games when I was in the 3rd grade, and I wanted to be Jack Ryan. So I went to the Naval Academy and ended up flying jets. And it was really, for me, when I got to the fighter squadron the first time, that I felt truly at home. I understood the structure and the rules. Basically, they gave us a box to operate within and said basically like, hey, anything inside of this you can do, and we expect excellence, and that's the standard. And for me, I have a really hard time with arbitrary rules. And so most of my whole life, like in school and the Naval Academy and other places, like there's a lot of arbitrary rules that never made sense to me. In the fighter squadron, there's no arbitrary rules. Like, the rules are all there to keep us safe, to keep us alive. And there's actually a lot of freedom when you have those kind of boundaries. And then, okay, I understand what the edges of this operating envelope are. And now inside here, I can really push the limits of, mental, physical, creativity, and that kind of performance is really something that makes you feel truly alive. So it was an epic experience. I loved my time in the fighter squadron. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
It's incredible. What were some of the tools and disciplines that you gained through that experience that you could then take into creating a business? Multiple.
Yeah, the Navy's really interesting because it is a big, lumbering, slow government organization. And so I learned as much, what to do versus what not to do. And so, bureaucracy is really tough for me. So I learned plenty of things that I would not do in my business. But some of the things that really shaped who I am. Number one, I think, is the power of debrief. So in the squadron, we would show up, we would plan for 90 minutes to 2 hours, we would fly for 60 to 90 minutes, and then we would come back, and the debrief would be like 3 to 4 hours. And we would tear apart every single little thing that we did, and we wouldn't talk about the things we did right because that's a standard. Instead, we would talk about all the things we did wrong. And we had a saying, which is criticism keeps us alive. So we would really learn to thrive on criticism. And by the way, this has to be constructive criticism. Like one of the first things you learn is you're not going to give criticism for criticism's sake. It really has to be constructive feedback that they can take and implement. But if we're giving feedback in that way, if you can start to learn how to thrive on that criticism and really get excited to learn and improve constantly, like to me, that is one of the biggest game changers as an entrepreneur. Is like, the reality is we're always going to be doing something wrong. We're always going to have areas to improve. And, if we don't have thick skin, that can be really overwhelming. So learning to love that criticism, I think, is something that's totally critical for entrepreneurs.
Did you fly with the same people a lot? And the next part of that would be, if so, how important was that bond and trust in the people that you're literally side by side, from one small error away from literally losing your life?
Yeah, so it's not like Top Gun where you're like paired with one guy forever. But the squadron's not that big. There's 16 pilots and 16 WISOs, weapon systems officers, and you end up flying with you end up flying with everybody quite a bit. And then when you're in combat, you end up getting paired with somebody that you start to fly with every day. And I had a couple different guys, but one of them, my best friend from the squadron, Jay, I ended up starting my company with. So we went, tested ourselves in combat, figured, hey, you know what, we're actually pretty good under pressure together. I wonder if this translates to business, and it turns out that it does. And being able to draw on those experiences while building an 8-figure company, I think, was really critical because, no matter what was happening in the business, people would be losing their heads, deals blowing up on a Friday afternoon, not getting funded or whatever that looks like. We're like, hey man, we're not getting shot at. So we had a saying, like, there's no emergencies in the oil business, right? And that's kind of the way we ran things. And yeah, like I said, being conditioned to the type of pressure of landing on an aircraft carrier and flying combat operations and all of that stuff, like, it puts business in perspective for sure.
So you and Jay got a couple years under your belt at this company, and then you decide, hey, let's start our own thing.
Yeah, and when I went to work for my mentor originally, when I was getting out of the Navy, he said it was the best time in the history of oil and gas to be in the oil and gas business, and he was right.
And this is what year?
I left the Navy in 2011, and then we started our company in 2013. And he was right. Like, it was the beginning of a total gold rush in the Permian Basin, a resurgence of a massive boom in that business, unlocked by horizontal drilling and access to new shale reserves that were previously thought unrecoverable. And so, it really was an incredible time. And one of the things I think that we underestimate in entrepreneurship is luck. And this isn't to suggest, right, that like to denigrate our accomplishments or, that I'm just giving it all up to the universe and being lucky. But the reality is, like, when I look at successful entrepreneurs, there is a massive luck factor, right? There's always a distribution of outcomes when it comes to starting any business. And the reality is like, we love to have survivorship bias and look back and be like, well, I worked really hard and I was very smart. And all of that can be true, but there's also a massive factor of luck that plays into any success story. And so for us, we were very much in the right place at the right time. And a few years earlier or a few years later, this thing wouldn't have worked. But because we were in that right place at the right time, and we made good decisions with the information that we had, it was a really incredible run. And so we were very fortunate and made some great decisions.
So talk about the exit and how much planning was involved in that. Was it a build to sell mentality, or was it, again, just a bit of a timing thing for you guys?
Yeah, so I always consider myself an investor more than an entrepreneur. And let me tell you the difference. For me, an entrepreneur is someone with that indomitable spirit, burn the boats, like, I'm going to make this work at all costs. And an investor looks at it from more of a 30,000-foot overview, goes, hey, I need to be right more often than I'm wrong, but if I am wrong, I'm going to cut my losses and double down on my wins. And so it's just a very different mentality. And so, yes, I was the CEO of the company, but really I was the CIO, the chief investment officer. I was looking at my 64 tab spreadsheet and deciding what we were going to invest in, how we were going to buy and sell. And so I got a lot of reps under my belt looking at deals and assessing probabilities and outcomes. And as this crazy boom started to mature, we were looking at, for example, land that we were buying in 2013 for like $3,000 an acre. By the time 2019 rolled around, that same stuff was like $18,000 an acre. And I looked at this massive run up and went, okay, there's actually more downside than upside here, right? So for me, it was all about protecting that downside and going, hey, if we sell now, if the bottom falls out of this thing, because oil and gas is a total boom and bust type of industry, we can massively protect our downside and lock in our profits. And I was really just calculating probabilities and outcomes, but I look really smart at that time because we sold in 2019, and in 2020 the bottom did drop out. Oil went even negative for a little while in spring of 2020. So we look smart. It really was again, there was a luck factor in timing the market, and I certainly didn't know that was coming. But just looking at what we had done and what the industry had done as a whole, thought that there would be a potential that we needed to take some chips off the table. So that's exactly what we did.
Yeah, sounds like a gut feeling that things were good, timing was great.
Totally.
So you guys sell. It's an 8-figure exit. You're potentially on top of the world, but fast forward a couple of years, you're unfulfilled, you're feeling shitty about yourself, you're just not in a good spot. What happened?
Yeah, so a thing that I say a lot is that the day I sold my company, I thought I'd never be unhappy again. And to back up and understand why that's the case, like we're told all of these things to do in society, right? Like work hard and get a good job in school. And I'd done all the things that society told me to do that would make me happy. I tested myself in combat. I'd started and sold a company. I had the money and the cars and the house and like all the stuff that you were supposed to have to live the American dream. And I woke up and I wasn't any different. And it was like, oh no, if this didn't work, if all of these external achievements didn't work, like now what? And so really kind of started to go through this what does it all mean thing. At the same time, I acquired a distressed company. I thought it was going to be a quick, 12 to 18 month turnaround. I was going to sell it for 5 times what I paid. And it turned out to be a total disaster. After I closed on the acquisition, things started to get worse. I was losing $100,000 a month, and just watching my bank account quickly dwindle towards zero. I was more stressed out than I've ever been. There was some days I didn't want to get out of bed. I was so anxiety ridden and didn't want to face the day. And so kind of stepped back and fell back on this power of debrief that we talked about earlier. I was like, okay, I'm in this bad situation, but how do I get here? And then more importantly, like how do I get out? And I realized a couple of things. Number one is that the playbook I was employing was not working, meaning I was still caught in the same mentality as when I had just started my company. And I needed a different skill set. If you think about it's like starting a company versus scaling a company, right? Like when you start a company, you wear all the hats, you have this burn the boats, full speed ahead mentality, like I'll do everything and hold it all together with chewing gum and string. But then
absolutely.
As you start to find success, right, you need to shift that skill set to hiring world-class teams and delegating and leaning more into the vision. And the same thing comes with wealth building, right? We start off and we take all the risk because we really have nothing to lose. But at some point, we have to start shifting that mindset to become a defender of wealth rather than just an accumulator of wealth. And the reality is I was completely addicted to risk. I was investing in all kinds of startups and risky deals the same way I was at the beginning of my career, but I no longer needed to take that risk. In fact, I should have been solving for something completely different than I was. So that was the first issue.
How much of that was masked by the confidence of having a massive successful exit of like, I did this really well, so my track record's got to be really good.
Yeah, we call this Midas touch syndrome, is that because I'm really smart in this area, I must be really smart at all those other areas.
Sure,
right?
You're awesome.
I'm a great oil and gas investor. That must means I am a great venture capitalist. And the reality is that I only knew enough to be dangerous. And while I am and always have been, really good at being what I call like a natural handicapper, like understanding probabilities, I did not have the 10,000 hours of expertise required to be a great angel investor. And, again, taking that enough to be dangerous mentality, I also had a lot to learn about risk management and understanding, how the wealthiest folks actually allocate their portfolio. Because the reality is I was doing what I thought rich people did, right? We have all these success stories of people exiting software companies and then becoming legendary angel investors, right? The Tim Ferrisses and the Mark Andreessens and, you name it. When we really pedestalize this idea of angel investing. But, the reality is when you're building a venture capital portfolio, you need to invest in 67 different assets, and then 2 of those are going to actually return the portfolio. And like 55 of them are going to fail, right? So I didn't understand the fundamentals of venture capital. And by the way, that's just even considering you have access to the right deals. And as a retail investor, it's really hard to get access to those deals. So my investment thesis was broken from the get-go, and I had no idea because I just was mimicking, this culture that I saw on the internet and in our society.
Sure.
And so that's when I got really serious about diving into how to build a portfolio and interviewing wealthy family offices and professional investors and like really getting clear about what the mechanics should actually look like. And so that was a multi-year process of going to therapy, hiring coaches, interviewing family offices, studying portfolio theory, and just getting really smart about the things that I was lacking when I was more of a cowboy.
Wow. The 2 things I wanted to ask. One is as you're sort of, chipping away at this war chest that you had built, that all of a sudden risky. How far did you get down from maybe a percentage? Like how risky was it for you potentially losing all?
Yeah, I mean, so close. And when I say close, because what I didn't understand was the power of liquidity. So I'm still a multimillionaire on paper, but I can't access anything because it's all tied up in illiquid investments. So, now on the backside, like some of those have started to pay out and I've been able to rebalance. But I mean, there was a point where I was basically down to zero liquidity. And zero liquidity means zero options. You have no optionality if you run out of cash that you can actually access. So I wasn't at zero from a net worth perspective, but net worth doesn't matter, right? Liquidity is truly all that matters when it comes to building wealth. And I had essentially run myself out of options. So there was a very uncomfortable time period for a bit until some of those assets started to mature and being able to sell and rebalance. So I was truly lucky that I didn't have to start from zero, but it was enough of a lesson to go, okay, like how do I get a lot smarter and understand my relationship to money, understand why I was taking these risks from a fundamental perspective, and then learn how to build things in a more sustainable way.
Great. I appreciate sharing that. Do you remember the moment where you said, I need to help others with the lessons I learned?
Yeah, I mean, great question. I had already kind of started down. I mean, I started coaching about the time that I sold my company in late 2018, 2019. But from the beginning, I was more of a general business coach, so just like helping people with business strategies. And as that started to evolve, I realized that really wasn't the conversation that I wanted to have. Like it was my zone of excellence versus my zone of genius. Like, yeah, I can help people, with high level strategy and scaling their business. But the conversation I really want to have is, what does fulfillment look like? Like, how do I do this in a way that creates the life that I want to actually create? Because, when any of us start businesses, there's a reason that we're doing that. And it's typically to create our dream outcome or our dream life, right? Like no one dreams of working 100-hour weeks.
True.
Like, hey, most of us probably want to create freedom.
Romanticize about something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's all about how do I calibrate to that thing that I actually want to create? And that's the thing that I really want to bring to the founders that I work with is like, hey, how do we make sure that this thing that we've created we don't end up being a slave to our own business? Like, how do we create the life that we actually want to create? Like, meaning what does fulfillment look like? What does alignment look like? What do I value? And how do I use the wealth that I've generated to serve those values and create the life that I actually want to live? And, I realized that even, kind of despite this financial crisis, like, I never lost sight of that. And I always was like, oh yeah, like, okay, I bought this distress company. And the reality is I didn't need any more money at that point, right? Like I took this on into my life because I was being driven by external validation and like, oh, wouldn't this look great, as another skin on the wall?
Yeah.
But I should have been solving for something completely different. Like I could have been riding mountain bikes with my son every day and I didn't have to work anymore. And so getting really clear on like, why was I inviting this chaos into my life? And how do I inoculate against that in the future? And how do I set up systems so that I keep myself, out of situations that could jeopardize my freedom of time and my freedom of mind and the things that actually matter to me. And solving for more money wasn't one of those things.
How many times do you see that working with entrepreneurs that have either exited or might be exiting, or they're running something big, but there's that constant chase to fulfill sometimes just the hours, being the person, the go-to. There's that thing that just gave them so much for years, but they don't know how to operate without it.
Yeah, I mean, here's the reality is that when I see a busy entrepreneur, what I really see almost in every case is someone who's running from something, right? There's a deep discomfort, either a feeling of inadequacy or a childhood wound or something that they are running from. And they are hoping to fill that hole by building something meaningful and getting accolades in society, whether that's money, whether that's fame, like whatever it is that they're trying to solve for, is trying to solve something that's inside them. And what happens is, and this was very much the case for me as well, we sell the thing, we do the thing, we plant our flag on top of the mountain, and it doesn't work. The hole's not fulfilled, right? And now we have an opportunity to go one of two ways. The first thing is to dive right back in and start building something else, and hoping that maybe the second time around it's gonna be better. And this is what so many folks do, right? Or we have the chance to go, hey, let me take a break, let me step back. Let me pull on this thread of like, what is this discomfort? Why is it so hard for me to sit still? One of the things I hear so often is like, oh, I could never just sit still and hang out all day. I'm like, well, why not? Like what's underneath that?
What are you afraid of?
Yeah, what are you afraid of? Like, what are you afraid to feel is really the ultimate question. And I'm not suggesting that, if you sell a company, you need to be retired forever. But so many of us work hard our whole lives, and no one on their deathbed says, I wish I spent more time working, right? Like for the most part, it is such a gift when we're young enough to enjoy it, to get the ability to take time and space away from work and really do some self-reflection. And I think it's a total missed opportunity to sell and then dive into something immediately on the backside and not take the gift that we've been given. And especially, in our 30s, 40s, whatever that looks like, to be able to take 6 months or a year and go, okay, like what am I really about? Like, what am I doing here? What is meaning, purpose, and fulfillment look like for me? Like, getting the chance to answer those questions without the pressure to go out and work, I think is such an amazing opportunity for folks. And so I really encourage anyone who is looking at selling their company to just take a step back and sit in stillness and figure out what is it that's been driving you up until this point. And there is so much gold in leaning into that work and into that process of inquiry and self-discovery.
The word that's coming to mind was identity. And I see it, probably you do too, so many times, whether they're leaving something or even being a part of something. And I have my own version of this, but we get so attached to I was forever Chris from Brand Boulevard, like everything in my life. And I'll never forget, Brave Soul Phillips, his retreat in 2016 was that first time I think I ever in the longest time had a week without technology. And that year, I remember I started, pull that elastic a bit and expand it. And I'll never forget calling my mom, telling her I'm coming home. They're about 3 hours away. And I said, like, hey, I'm coming home Tuesday. And she's like, what? And like, she called me back saying, like, sweetie, what's wrong? Like, are you okay? Because it was years of always getting the invite, but Chris is too busy. And there was this like, almost, it was a warped sense of identity attached to this thing that was just always filling those things for me. And I had to really, force myself to create space for finding out, more about me, to create space for relationships or family. And I'm glad I did that then, and didn't wait another 10 years. But, talk about identity and how important that piece of it and how attached you see people to the thing that got them.
Yeah. I mean, so one of my favorite questions for post-exit entrepreneurs to just start with fundamentally is, who am I without my company? Right. And
great question.
Like, as we start to answer that question, we start to see those parts of ourselves that get wrapped up. Like, it feels really good to be needed, to have all these people relying on you and coming to you for the answers, right? Like, we get addicted to that feeling of being needed. And then all of a sudden on the backside, all of that disappears. Now there's this vacuum of time and space. No one's relying on us. There's no pressure to do anything. Entrepreneurs are a really interesting bunch because most of us have a driven personality type. There's an excellent book by my friend Doug Brackman called Driven that explains the neuroscience of why this happens. But essentially, in situations that would cause fight or flight in most people, we actually drop into calm in this chaos, right? And it is a really useful evolutionary adaptation. Like, when things are the most chaotic, we elicit high performance, except for when we're safe. And when we're safe, we miss that pressure, right? We want to operate at that high end of our capability. And so we will create chaotic situations within our life in order to elicit that stress response. And that is the thing that we need to separate ourselves from as we get on the backside of selling companies. It's like, okay, wait a minute. How do I make sure that I don't self-sabotage my way into a stressful situation?
Yeah, for sure. Mike, what's been the most rewarding part of you, creating this brand, this business, helping so many people along the way? What's been the best part for you?
I mean, this sounds counterintuitive, but I think probably the best part of being a coach and building a personal brand and putting myself out on social media has actually been the mirror that is created and the accountability that is required. Like, first of all, I am not going to be out of integrity with my clients, meaning I am never going to ask someone to do something I'm not willing to do myself. So on this path, there's this continuous ability to check in with myself and go, hey, where are the areas of my life that I can level up? So, I gave up alcohol about a year and a half ago. And the reality is because my friend asked me a great question and said, hey, like, what would you tell a client who's drinking every night? And I said, I would ask them what they're trying not to feel. So I got really quiet with myself and said, what am I trying not to feel here? And the answer was nothing. Like, this was a leftover habit from my 20s and early 30s when there was a lot I was trying not to feel.
Sure.
Right? But
yeah,
as I had been diving into this work for so long and doing a lot of healing, like, it was a leftover empty habit. So, I took that opportunity to let go of alcohol, something that had been a massive part of my life for many, many years. And it's just things like that, right? This opportunity to continue leaning into what it takes to become the best version of myself. And, I love seeing client success stories and seeing the people flourish that come into my programs and do the one-on-one coaching. But the reality is the best gift is for myself, of always having this standard to continue to become the best version of myself.
Oh, that's incredible. I watched your live stream. That was literally a 20-minute sort of your why behind that. And I think for anyone that wants to know more, it was vulnerable. It was beautiful. And I think really powerful in a world where there's a lot more people looking at alcohol and other things that have been just societal, parts of what we've always done or what we do. And I think again, it was a great piece on your why, and not just for you, but for anyone within your circles and your clients, really impactful. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks, man. I mean, it was a big decision. I mean, I built my house around wine. I have 2 wine cellars in this house, and like wine was a huge part of my life. And so,
yeah,
but I very much, one of my core values as a human is open-mindedness. And I don't want to be too attached to any particular idea or thought or outcome. And so, I always want to be examining things in my life critically. And the reality is that, I don't resonate with the term alcoholic. Certainly habitual drinker. It's not like, I hit rock bottom and was driving drunk or sabotaging my life to an extreme. But it was just like, hey, wait a minute, like, is this habit really serving me? And even though I have built this habit and this hobby and wine collection, all of these things, like, is this still who I want to be? And if the answer is no, okay, what am I going to do about it?
Yeah, it's great. Almost that identity you attach to it, but when you broke it down, it was like I can do something different. I think that was the powerful takeaway from that for a lot of people.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes from Alan Watts is, "You were under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago."
Fantastic quote. You and I were chatting maybe a few months back, but I was picking your brain on the coaching business because I recently started my new venture, sort of like, let's call it May, June. But something that really resonated with me was you made a commitment recently to go, I'll say, all in and like take this to more people, to more of the world. What shifted for you?
Well, I've got to credit my dear friend Dan Martell, who is an absolute legend, and if you guys listening know who he is, he's just been on this rocket ship of growth.
If not, look him up and follow.
Yeah, absolutely. Dan is an absolute savage and a sage, and one of the most brilliant humans I know.
Yeah, he's incredible.
And a couple years ago, we were on a snowboarding trip, and he looked at me in a way that he has, and just said, "How long are you going to keep playing small?" Man, that question really punched me in the gut, because essentially here is someone who I deeply respect saying, "I see something in you that you are not seeing in yourself. And how long are you going to keep all of this knowledge and all of this experience and all of this hard-earned wisdom that you have? How long are you going to keep that to yourself?" And the reality is that I was letting my fear of putting videos out on social media and by the way, like, it's scary, right? Like, everybody cringes the first time they upload a video to Instagram, right?
It's awful.
It's terrible. But am I more interested in keeping that part of myself safe and not subjecting myself to the scrutiny, or having the ability to go out and share the things that I've learned with folks and hopefully shortcut the pain that I've been through? Like, that is such an opportunity that literally all of us have to take the pain that we've experienced and share that with somebody else and go, "Hey, you may not get it right the first time, but let me tell you what happened to me, and maybe you can avoid some of this." What a cool way to channel that into something positive for the world. And all it costs is your ego and your ability to play it safe. Like, I'll sacrifice that every time. So I'm deeply grateful to Dan for pushing me on that. And if, like I said, I pride myself on open-mindedness. If you told me 2 years ago that I would enjoy uploading videos to YouTube or Instagram, or I would enjoy creating content, I would have laughed you out of the room. And it turns out it's one of my favorite things I do now. And there's just something really special, I think, about uploading a video to Instagram and going, "Oh my God, this is so cringy." And then getting 10 messages from people going, "Hey, I really needed to hear that today. Like, thanks for putting that out." And going, "Oh, okay. Like, cool. I'm doing the right thing."
Yeah. I think it's amazing. And who are you to decide what's good or valuable or not for anyone else? That's up to them. And whether it's no comments or 100, I think that's the thing that has helped me to say, hey, I'm not here to be the filter. Speak from the heart and let everyone else decide that.
Yeah, totally. And the reality is like, I'm doing my best to create from an authentic place and share as much unfiltered knowledge as I possibly can. And so then on the other side of things, when people comment that I'm a scammer, or like all the crazy shit people say on the internet, it's just like, it's not going to be for everybody, and that's the reality. But
Yeah.
when that's happening, I can go look at all of the success stories and look at all the people that have, I mean, quite literally changed their lives, not because of me, but as a result of maybe good questions that I've helped them, go deeper on, or whatever it is. It's like, hey, I know that I am doing the thing that I am born to do. And I can really say that with all honesty. Like I have this ability to help people find perspective and find clarity. And, really, I don't like the word responsibility, but like I need to be a steward of that gift. And like, how do I share that gift with the world in the most effective way? And we've been given this incredible opportunity with social media. Like, these platforms exist because of content creators. Their product is content. And so they've invested billions in developing an algorithm that allows me to put my message in front of more people for free. What a cool opportunity.
Absolutely. I mean, my gut response to those is like, just change your feed if you don't like it. I mean, unfollow. Like, hey, I'm not holding your phone to your head here. So, but yeah, I believe that's the case, and I think that I'm glad to hear you say that in a way it is your responsibility now that you've discovered the impact and the ability to help other people. I think that is a wonderful responsibility to be able to carry on.
Totally. Well, and I can't imagine a more fulfilling career, right? And I think that we do young people a tremendous disservice by saying like, hey, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. Like, that is really bad advice, because I don't care if it's flying jets for the Navy or being a coach or whatever it is. Like, there are days it feels like work.
Yeah. There's shit you got to
deal with no matter what you're doing, right? And so
Absolutely.
It's just trying to find something that lines up with enough of your values where on the days where it feels like work, you go, yeah, but it's still worth it, right? And that's the thing that really keeps me going is like, hey, there are certainly still days that I wake up and I'm like, man, this is really hard to grow this business. This is overwhelming. I don't want to create content today, or like whatever it is. I don't feel like doing this today. But then I can look back and go, yeah, man, but look at what we're actually doing here. Like, this is as important as anything could possibly be. And I am willing, again, to like sacrifice myself and my comfort and my ego in service of others. And I think if we can get to that place, like, that is what alignment looks like, and that is what ultimately brings fulfillment, right? Because happiness is a fleeting emotion. Like, we can't solve for happiness. You can't guarantee you're going to be happy every day, right? No matter how hard you try, there's going to be ups.
And fulfillment doesn't come from that constant every day is a fucking great day. I mean, that's the reality, is that we get so much. The gifts come from the really, the unsolvable or perceived unsolvable problems, the challenges, the hurt, the pain. Those are gifts where you get through those and you come out on the other side a different, a better, a more resilient, whatever, insert name, person.
Yeah. Totally. And like I'm in a place right now, I told you about some of the tough times where I was full of stress and anxiety, losing money, and didn't want to get out of bed some days. Like, I'm on the backside of that now. I'm in a really great phase of life. I'm happier, healthier, more fulfilled, and more in alignment than I've ever been. The only thing that I can guarantee is that there will be hard times again at some point. Like, something is going to happen and throw a wrench in all of that. And so all I can do is A, be in the present and really enjoy what I've created right now, and then B, not be too attached to having to stay here and stay in this really great spot, because who knows what that looks like, but like necessarily life comes in waves and comes in cycles. And so how can I create the most alignment and the most fulfillment and do the things that serve my values so that when tough times come, I know that I am still living in alignment with the person that I want to be.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, it's great advice. Mike, we only got a few minutes left, but I want to talk about family. You and I were chatting quick before. You got 2 kids, 7 and 12. How much has being an entrepreneur impact you as a father? And sort of the next question is, what values do you want to instill into your kids as they get older?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes that entrepreneurs make is trying to project their own values onto their children. Meaning, we found this path that works for us. And a question I get a lot from entrepreneurs is like, well, how do I raise my kids to be entrepreneurs? And my first question to them was like, why would you want to do that? like this path is,
you sick bastard. Why would you want that?
Exactly. Like, this path
not
is
for everyone.
For everybody. And so for me, the value that I want to really instill into my kids is how to create their own sovereignty, how to check in with themselves, come to their own inner wisdom, and really learn how to forge their own path that creates alignment for themselves. And I can't do that for them. All I can teach them is how to ask really good questions, right? And so the thing I want to do most with my kids is just have good conversations and teach them the process of inquiry to arrive at their own inner wisdom, which means I don't get to tell them what's right for them. I can tell them that's what's worked for me and my experience. I can help them delineate what consequences might be for the choices they're making, but I actually don't get to decide what is correct or right in their path. And so, what I try to do is just really empower my kids with the choice, the freedom to decide what's best for them, and trust that they're going to arrive at however way they need to. And if they make mistakes or if they go through some pain along the way, like, that's actually not mine to decide if I can take that away from them or not.
Yeah, that's beautiful advice. What advice would you give yourself going back 5-10 years? I always ask this question.
Yeah. This is one of my favorite questions as well. And for me, so much. But number one, I'm going to go with the financial side because that was a big theme in my case, which is you actually need a lot less than you think you do. So I create a framework called Escape Velocity and 3 levels of financial freedom, and you can look that up on my website. But basically, if you spend, let's say, $20,000 a month, all you need is $5 to $7 million in a fixed income portfolio to cover that spending for the rest of your life. Like, if you had told me that at 30 years old, like, I would have made such different decisions, right? Like, the reality is I could have been financially free at 36 years old. Instead, I'm deploying all this capital into startups and risky assets and all of these crazy deals. Like, if I had just been stacking that cash, like, I could have hit financial freedom so much earlier. And so, what I would tell to my 30-year-old self and any entrepreneurs in their journey out there is your business is your method for generating wealth, and your investments should be for protecting wealth. And so many of us get that. We take money that we've earned from our business, and then we go swing for the fences with our investments, right? One of my mentors told me, don't make it twice. So if you've already spent the time and energy to make this money, don't go immediately go throw it back onto the roulette table and hope that it pays off again. Right? Take the money that you've earned, stack it over here in safe investments, and then focus on growing your primary business.
That's incredible. Listen, I could pick your brain for another hour, if not 5. I really appreciate your time and just all the great stories and experiences that you've shared with us. So you're a wise man. I'm grateful to have you in my life. The last thing is just, for everyone that's listened to this is, how do we find your work and get in touch?
Yeah, follow me on Instagram at mbrown.co. And you can head to my website, unbreakablewealth.com, sign up for my newsletter. I spend a lot of time every week pouring into my newsletter. It's long form. I'm breaking all the rules, what people tell you to do, how to grow an audience. I'm writing what I want to write about subjects that I care about, and it's my favorite thing I do. So check out the newsletter. It's worth the subscribe.
That's awesome. Well, thanks, man. I really appreciate your time today, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.
I appreciate you, Chris.
You too. Thanks.